Now there are about 400,000 U.S. sailors and soldiers deployed in the Pacific theater. Most of them are with the U.S. allies in the Far East, South Korea and Japan, especially in its colony Okinawa, but they also have significant base presence in the Philippines and their coordinating center in Hawaii, as well as deployment nodes in San Diego in Southern California, San Francisco Bay Area, as well as in the Seattle area, in the Puget Sound. These are all areas that have a tradition of active duty resistance. The training programs that all of the military branches in the United States use are anti-human, not only physically against the recruits, but also they inculcate a deeply racist culture and brutality in these soldiers that many, many have fought against. There is a GI resistance hotline based on the West Coast that has seen an increase from about 10,000 inquiries a year to about 30,000 inquiries in the most recent period. If we can bring this united front against fascism and militarism as a strengthening force to support these GIs, we will be able to provide the missing ingredient that has made it frustrating, often difficult if not impossible, for soldiers and sailors to have the courage to say no. They need a strong civilian movement behind it. But when they do have it, as they did, for example, during the Vietnam War period, they can be the critical force that actually disarms the U.S. military machine. I remember very well back in 1969, there was a sanctuary movement in which dozens of U.S. GIs, soldiers and sailors, refused to be deployed to Vietnam. The result was electrifying. It's true that it faced significant military repression, but it also spread like wildfire among the troops. This happened also in San Diego, where the Navy base is very deeply involved in essentially recruiting and staffing the aircraft carriers that they send into the Pacific theater. The same is true in Seattle. We need to remember that these young people who all were recruited into the U.S. military machine on a false basis are sitting ducks. It's crystal clear that the U.S. military leadership is prepared to sacrifice these people in the tens of thousands for a war effort against China that is absolutely crazy. There is no basis a war against China by the United States. Look at the history. The U.S. was only able to fight to a draw against the Korean Liberation Forces and the volunteer Chinese forces during the U.S.-Korea War back in the early 1950s. In Vietnam, they lost completely. They were forced to evacuate the U.S. Embassy by helicopter as their troops and their puppet troops were totally defeated on the battlefield. And they have lost again and again since then in Iraq and Afghanistan, even in Syria where they tried to topple the government there. And now they've already lost against Russia fighting against NATO expansion in Ukraine, and they're rapidly losing in their support for Israeli genocide against the Palestinians. It's notable that among the most significant solidarity actions with Palestine resistance has been from active duty GIs. One GI burned himself in front of the White House while saying, "Free Palestine," an act of crazy solidarity, but one that genuinely inspired and electrified the anti-war veterans and active duty soldiers. So there is a kind of what you could call dry kindling of a prairie fire that can happen in the United States in opposition to the obvious blunders of the U.S. government in supporting fascism in Ukraine and fascist genocide in Israel. But what we see is the movement against their militarism and imperialism, which has been weak over the last several decades, is suddenly surging and becoming both stronger and more united. And that's what we need to stop the U.S. war machine and to prevent war against China.
姐妹们总烦恼脸上细纹干燥与暗沉，现在起跟我一起放心交给 KS Royal Face 皇家颜值逆时奇迹系列。KS Royal Face 皇家颜值逆时奇迹系列，它添加5种 EGF， 专门防止肌肤老化，强化皮肤修复，增加肌肤弹性水嫩，轻松抚平皱纹，换回青春自信。KS Royal Face 皇家颜值逆时奇迹，活肤露、全效精华、精华霜，即刻启动冻龄密码。